What is going on, everybody? So as many of you know, I do a segment on my channel called the Criterion Corner where I select films from the Criterion collection and talk about them in great detail. I love doing that because I always get to discover really amazing films that I may not have seen otherwise, because Criterion highlights them. In between their normal collection and the channel, I've been exposed to so many amazing films, but there are a ton of films that I would love to see put in the Criterion collection because they're films oftentimes that have not gotten really great Blu-ray restorations, or they're films that are really hard to find that I think are really amazing pieces of cinema that deserve that type of recognition. And so today I thought I would cover some films that I think should be in the Criterion collection, and thought it would be fun to hear from you out there who enjoy the Criterion collection, some films you think should be in the collection. So let me know in the comments some films that you think should be in the Criterion collection. But without further ado, let's get into it now. I'm going to talk about some films that I personally think should be in the Criterion collection. So first up, as a surprise to no one, Synecdoche, New York from director Charlie Kaufman, or honestly, any of the Charlie Kaufman's three films. Anomalisa, I'm thinking of ending things, but Synecdoche, New York is my favorite of Charlie Kaufman's films. This was actually streaming on the Criterion channel recently, which, like, in my mind, I'm like, come on guys, just do it, because the only version of this that I feel like you can find is a cheap Blu-ray copy, which I already have. But I think Charlie Kaufman is one of the most brilliant filmmakers to ever exist. I think that the way that he approaches storytelling is so unique and different than most minds. He really kind of combines surrealism into these themes that he's conveying that feel like, oh, here's a snapshot of everyday life, but let's put something in it that's really overt and ridiculous to convey the message a little bit stronger than if you were just to portray it normally. And Synecdoche, New York is filled with just moments that stick out in my mind that are just so brilliant. And one of the other things I really love about Charlie Kaufman is the way that he portrays mental health in his films in an unabashed way that does not feel like it's polishing or glamorizing the things that people with mental health struggles go through when you're at the lowest of the low, when you're thinking all of the most horrendous thoughts in your brain that you could possibly think, and everything that brings you there really kind of elevates everything that you're watching on screen. And the other thing I like about his movies is that not all the characters that he writes are the most likable people in the world, because that's just not reality. And I think that it's cool to create these characters that have such an interesting dichotomy, where when you're watching them on screen, there's things that they do that you're just like, wow, they're kind of a shitty person. They're not doing something super great, but then in another moment you'll feel a ton of empathy for them, and you'll think like, oh wow, this is really horrible what they're going through. And I think having that push and pull as an audience member, where you're constantly grappling with what you're watching on screen, and that they can really create this feel, that Charlie Kaufman can just create this feeling of like feeling empathy towards another human being, even if you don't necessarily like everything about them. And I think he's elaborated on that in all of his work, even in his book Antkind, which I actually did a review on my channel a while back. But Kaufman is a genius. I love all of his films. Synecdoche, New York would be the one I'd love to see in the Criterion collection, probably more than any of the three of them. But yeah, I'd love to see any of his work end up in the collection. It's phenomenal. I would talk about it for an entire video. Up next, and this is a very recent watch, is the Don Hertzfeldt animated film It's Such a Beautiful Day. This is a really hard film to find as it is right now. I think you can like rent it on Vimeo. There are physical copies that exist. I think there's like some Blu-ray copies out there. But this, similar to Synecdoche, New York, which obviously if you've been watching my channel for a while, you probably realize that I'm someone who struggles with mental health issues, and I'm someone who's dealt with a lot of trauma in my life. And so a lot of the movies that I gravitate towards are ones that linger on that subject matter, because it really kind of gives you something to grab a hold on to and let you know that someone else realizes the shit that you've gone through, and it makes things easier. And I think It's Such a Beautiful Day covers that idea of existential dread, the fear of losing your life, the fear of, did I waste my life? Looking at familial trauma, did mental health issues in your family's past get brought up to your life personally now? What kind of effects are going to be made on you with the decisions that people in your life have made? And I think that the beauty of it is that it's done through a stick figure character named Bill, which I think really kind of takes away from you not being able to attach yourself onto the character, because I think making it such a simple character that like anyone could kind of apply themselves to really makes it a more immersive experience. Truly one of the most creative films visually I've seen when it comes to the animation medium, because obviously the drawing element of it is very simple with stick figure characters, but there's a lot going on around it that makes it so incredible to see. And yeah, this is just a movie that I have not stopped thinking about since I watched it. It's one of the best movies ever made, and I 100% think that Don Hertzfeldt belongs in the Criterion Collection. It's just an absolutely amazing film. Animation is a medium that needs more respect brought to it. I feel like a lot of times people immediately parallel animation with children's films, and that's not necessarily the case whatsoever. And this would be one I'd love to see end up in the collection at some point. Up next is going to be the film Come On, Come On from director Mike Mills. Honestly, any of Mike Mills' films could go in there. I also love 20th Century Women. Both of those films are put out through A24, so I know like rights issues with A24. I don't know how difficult it is, especially with them putting out their own material lately, but like Uncut Gems got put in the Criterion Collection, so I'm not sure how that would work. But I think Mike Mills is one of the best directors when it comes to conveying life in a very realistic manner. He's a documentary filmmaker. He spent most of his career doing documentary before he got into narrative features. He also did the film Beginners with Ewan McGregor, which is the only film that he's made that I have not seen as far as like fictional narrative films. And the thing about Come On, Come On, and one of the reasons why I love it, is it's shot in beautiful black and white, but there's these series of vignettes where Joaquin Phoenix is doing interviews with these kids, talking to them about their day-to-day lives, and they were completely unscripted when Mike Mills filmed this movie. And I think the conversations that they have parallel so well with the actual narrative that the film is conveying. And it's just a really beautiful relationship between an uncle and his nephew that is conveyed in a time where they both need each other, that they probably neither one realize that they need each other in that specific moment. And I think all the performances in it are phenomenal. The score from the Dessner brothers from the band The National is absolutely phenomenal. It accompanies the film so well, and it's a movie that I constantly think about. It has these beautiful moments where there's pieces of literature that are read that like the actual title of the book and the author comes up, and I think it fits in so well, where a lot of times like little gimmicks like that don't necessarily work for a filmmaker. I feel like they fit so well in the overall trajectory of where the movie goes. And yeah, it's just an absolutely beautiful experience. Joaquin is one of my favorite actors of all time. It's a movie that I would love to see in the collection. I think Mike Mills deserves to be in there one way or the other. He's just an absolutely brilliant filmmaker. Up next is going to be another Joaquin Phoenix film. This is the film You Were Never Really Here from director Lynn Ramsey. I love Lynn Ramsey. Lynn is already in the Criterion Collection for her film Ratcatcher, which I think is absolutely brilliant, but You Were Never Really Here is my favorite in her catalog, and the reason why I love it so much is it's a very intense story about a man who hunts down child predators, but it's the way that Lynn is able to get inside of his mind with the visuals in this film. And I feel like it's a brief, like 89-minute movie. It's over super quick, but I think it's able to accomplish so much in its short runtime and really kind of pull at you in this very intense and visceral way. The action sequences in this feel very real in a way that like unsettled me. Like a lot of it is through like security cam footage, which I thought was really an interesting way to approach the storytelling in this movie. And just every performance from top to bottom is so great. When you're talking about subject matter that is this heavy and really disturbing, I feel like you have to approach it in a very specific way. And Lynn is one of those directors through her entire career that just does a phenomenal job consistently at portraying like real human life and experience in a way that doesn't pull back at all, and obviously covering intense subject matter in this film and one of her other films we need to talk about, Kevin, which talks about giving birth to a child and dealing with their psychological issues and like where that can lead to. I think she knows how to cover all different scopes of that in a way that really sits with you for a long time after you've watched it. Brilliant film. Love Lynn. I'm glad that she's in the Criterion Collection whatsoever, but I wish this movie was in there. Up next, I know a lot of people would probably say Moonlight, but I would love to see Barry Jenkins' If Beale Street Could Talk in the Criterion Collection. I think that this is Barry Jenkins' best film. It is one of the most beautiful romance stories that I have ever watched. Looks at two people who get put into a situation because of racism. One of the people gets arrested. Their relationship is put on trial because of that. They have to try to make it work while one of them is in jail and the other one is living their day-to-day life. It shows familial interaction so beautifully, just the struggles that they went through even before the arrest happened to try to find a place to live, to just navigate the world in a place during the civil rights movement where things were already so tense and awful as it was for black people in the United States of America. It is just one of the most tender, beautiful, incredible movies that I've ever seen. The Nicholas Britell score is just like mind-blowingly good. Some songs in that just stick in my head that never leave. I think Barry Jenkins is just an absolutely incredible director that has kind of seemed to move towards like long-form television since his first two movies, and I'd like to see him do more narrative features, because between this and Moonlight, 2 for 2 in my opinion. I know that he did the Underground Railroad television series. I'm not sure what he has slated to do next, but he's just such a phenomenal filmmaker that I think either this or Moonlight both deserve to be in the Criterion collection. I think Moonlight will probably get some. I know A24 put out some like vinyl box set for the anniversary for Moonlight. They'll probably do a standard Blu-ray at some point. I know that's like one of their most popular films they've ever released. So I'd love to see Beale Street get some sort of treatment, and I'd love to see it be in the Criterion collection. Up next, it wouldn't be a video if I didn't talk about right here, This is Killing of a Sacred Deer. I was gonna say The Lobster, but similar to what I've said about a lot of these directors, I really don't care what movies get in the collection, but Yorgos Lanthimos. Love Yorgos Lanthimos. The Lobster is my favorite film in his catalog, but I think that he has such a unique storytelling method with his movies. I think that the way that he has his actors deliver really deadpan dialogue to convey these, very simple ideas of issues that we have in day-to-day life. You look at a film like The Lobster that really is just examining relationship dynamics and how people are perceived, whether in or out of relationships in day-to-day life. Look at a film like Dogtooth that just looks at the way people raise their children and people that shelter their children too much and the effects of that. Obviously, all these films are taken to an extreme when it comes to the subject matter, which is what makes them resonate so heavily with the viewer. I just think that he is a brilliant mind, and I know that his films have been available on the Criterion channel before. None of his films are in the collection. Unfortunately, A24 has not done any sort of special releases with any of his films. Some of them, like Dogtooth and Alps, I think they've gotten Blu-ray releases before. I don't own either one of those. I'd really like to own both of those films because they're both phenomenal. The Lobster, like I said, is my favorite in his catalog. It's probably the one that I would want some kind of special collector's edition of, and Criterion does such a great job with like special features and interviews and like making sure that the film is presented exactly the way that the director wants it to be presented. And so I wish that they would get this movie because I absolutely love it, but any of Yorgos's films are fine in my book. Up next, I have to include something horror because I feel like the Criterion collection does a horrible job including horror movies. And if I was going to pick one horror film that should be in the collection, it's John Carpenter's The Thing. My definition of a perfect horror film: the pacing in this thing, the cinematography, the lighting, the Ennio Morricone score. Everything about this movie is what makes horror horror. The entire film being, who could possibly be infected? Who can we trust? We're isolated in this place that it is impossible to escape. There's just so many high stakes factors in this movie that keep you on the edge of your seat. Kurt Russell delivers a brilliant performance in this movie. It is a film that I could watch 100 times in 1 year and never get tired of it because it is so brilliantly directed. It's Carpenter's best movie in my opinion. It is in my top 5 horror movies of all time. It is a classic. If Criterion was going to get horror movies and they were going to put some kind of horror film in the collection, The Thing is like the best of the best. You couldn't do any better than that. You 100% should put The Thing in there. At least put some of Carpenter's work. I know like Night of the Living Dead is in there. There's a couple of like horror or horror adjacent films in the Criterion collection, but I'd love to see some more classics get in because they're just such a pinnacle in film history, and I think they're deserving of a spot in the collection. I'm gonna give one more. I could go on for hours and hours with these, but if I was gonna pick a film to put in the collection right now, one of my favorite films of all time, and that is Spike Jonze' Her. I think that Joaquin Phoenix's performance in this is amazing. If you can't tell, this is the 3rd Joaquin Phoenix movie I've put in this, and that is because Joaquin chooses to work with amazing directors. Her gives us a glimpse into the near but distant future in a way that feels very realistic. The Arcade Fire score in this is absolutely beautiful. Joaquin's performance, Scarlett Johansson's performance, Amy Adams' performance, everyone that shows up in this movie does an amazing job. It is a super thoughtful movie that, like, obviously with artificial intelligence being on the rise, this is about an operating system in your cell phone, like Siri, becoming super sentient in a way that, like, feels very relevant to the society that we live in now. And it's a movie that is so thoughtful and beautiful that I just wish would be in the Criterion collection, because it's one that every time I revisit, I love it more. It is a comfort film for me. It is a movie that I love a lot, and I will continue to talk about it again and again and again. So what are some films you think should be in the Criterion collection? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to do a part 2 of this, because there are a million films that I wish were in the Criterion collection, but I'd love to hear some films you think should be in the collection as well. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.